So Charles, we were just talking. So we're on now, but I got to ask you. You mentioned something about the weather. Are we in danger of watching you just kind of like off the screen? Is it how bad is it where you are?
Oh yeah, not today. So there's a hurricane. It's in the Gulf, and it's not a hurricane yet, actually, which is good. And it was aiming for Texas a little bit more, but it's tracking east. So it's supposed to be a Category 2, which is not grounds for evacuation or anything. But I gotta go get my generator going, and my kid gets out of school early. So hopefully it's all good. There's different types of hurricanes. Since Katrina, we don't have hurricane parties as much anymore. But if it's kind of mild and you lose power, then there's a lot of wine drinking and just sitting around because there's not much else to do. So we may get one of those. That shouldn't be too bad.
So I want to make sure I understand. So I've never been to a hurricane party. I've had
Yeah,
hurricanes at a party, but
yeah,
are you basically saying is it three and below as a party? Is two and below a party? How does it work?
yeah. I think that's up to people's
What?
own judgment.
Huh.
For us, if it's we'll evacuate now that I have kids and stuff. We used to all just stick around, but we'll evacuate, and so there's not really as much of a party if you evacuate because you're stuck in traffic and stuff. But it's really up to one's discretion.
Oh my God, I think that's
Yeah,
hysterical. I love the turning point for you was having dependents.
yeah. A lot of it is, yeah. We just batten down the hatches over here. I don't drink hurricanes. I would probably sip on some mezcal or some scotch for me.
Well, nobody in this house would be mad about that either. Yeah.
Yeah. But let's keep our fingers crossed. It's not supposed to hit till tomorrow, so we got plenty of time.
All right.
This is a
Well,
30-minute
we
show.
got some stuff to talk about. You want to try to squeeze a little bit of conversation in before you get blown away out there?
Yeah, that'd be great for sure.
All right, here we go.
CXR Channel, our premier podcast for talent acquisition and talent management. Listen in as the CXR community discusses a wide range of topics focused on attracting, engaging, and retaining the best talent. We're glad you're here.
All right, welcome everybody, Recruiting Community Podcast. We do weekly insights, updates, conversations with influencers, or you want to call them practitioners, you want to call them experts in that space, but folks that we know and whom we respect. We bring them onto the show to talk a little bit about what's going on in their life. So this is a great show today. We've got Charles Handler, who is the president and founder of Rocket Hire, and we're going to explore, I think we had pitched this as the evolving role of AI in the hiring process, and how both candidates and employers are adapting. Because we hear a lot of conversations on either side. Here's what we're doing in-house, or here's how we're taking care of the candidate experience. We're talking a little bit about both of those. First, a couple of things really quickly. We are streaming on the YouTube, on the Facebook, on the LinkedIn, on the Twitch. You can also check out cxr.work/podcast, where you can get any past or heads up for any future episodes. I think we're at like 420. I know it sounds like I make up a number every time we do this. I mean to look before we jump on, and I always forget. We are in the 400s, though. I think last time I told Jerry we were in the 3-somethings. But if you happen to be with us on LinkedIn today, where we're streaming, you can just jump into the chat and say hello. As a reminder, this was Jerry is not with us today, but as a reminder, we brought up jokes last time. If you've got jokes, we're looking for them, preferably the dad joke variety. But you can throw them in chat. We'll see if those get a chuckle. Also, another reminder, we are an ad-free labor of love. There are a couple of housekeeping things that we'll share with you, but you should know no one has paid to be on the show. No one has been compensated or spiffed, incentivized in any way. They're just on here because we asked them and they were nice enough to say yes. I do want to remind folks, cxr.work/COI. This is the Conflict of Interest and Transparency Report. We had a panelist together with about 30 TA leaders, co-facilitated with our friend Alex Murphy over at JobSync, who sponsored for that co-facilitation role, but helping with hundreds of our members who weighed in. You can actually download that report now, again, at cxr.works/COI. And this is a really interesting take on a pretty hot topic, about exactly what it says it is: conflicts of interest within talent acquisition, within transparency. There's even a rider that has been attached for download for increased transparency with working with potential vendors or partnered. We'd really encourage you to check that out. It is free. to everybody. And I think you'll really enjoy some of the insights that come out. It's about a 30-page report. So if you get a chance to grab that, you should. I think also on that page, you're also going to see a couple other reports that we have done. We are wrapping up one now for the intersection of recruitment marketing and employer branding, which has been a lot of fun. And I think we're moving into Q4 here pretty soon. So if you go out and download that report, you like what you see, you think, hey, I've got an opinion, maybe I want to be included, let us know. That page has a little form on there where you can sign up and see if you qualify to be included on the next report that we run or one in the future and get an invite yourself. So that'd be great. So with all of that, I want to go ahead and hit the button here and let him out of his cage. Charles, there you are. How are you, my man?
I am doing great. Thanks so much for having me. I am very pumped up after the intro music. That works.
We laugh. We had that when the first time that we launched the podcast years ago, 400 some odd episodes ago. And we keep saying we're going to change it, but then it runs and we end up kind of doing a little of this and some of that. And yeah, so I'm glad it's a hit.
Yeah, I like it. I mean, it's very good to kind of get your juices flowing coming on in here, and got my tongue loose a little bit, so I feel good.
Yeah. All right. So look, Charles, I want to give you a chance to introduce yourself. I've got a little bit of background on you that we should talk about and highlight. But before I do that, dad joke. Did you bring a dad joke today?
I got one standard. I'm usually, as I was telling you before, pretty spontaneous with these, and I like to make up my own. I don't really remember them, but there is the one of how much does it cost for a pirate to get his ear pierced?
How much does it cost for a pirate to get his ear pierced?
How much does a pirate have to pay to get his ear pierced? Yeah, that's right.
Okay, how much?
A buccaneer. That's it. A buccaneer. There you go. Da-dun-dun.
I like it. Paul Cameron's got one. He just dropped in chat for us. Thrilled to be here. What did one snowman say to the other? Do you smell carrots?
That one's great. I like that one a lot.
That is on par for dad joke. Yeah, quality.
Yeah.
I've got one. I got to ask you, Charles, why did the chat bot show up to work late?
I don't know.
It had a hard drive. Yeah, it had a hard drive.
Oh, yes. I like it. Very nice. And that's very contemporary one. That's not an old-fashioned joke at all.
Yeah, I like it. Look, I got another one. I'm going to save it towards the end, though. But look, Charlie, you've got 23 years at Rocket Hire, right? You're the president and founder there.
Mm-hmm.
And I think since 2000 or 2001, you've been a contributing author over at ERE.
Yep.
But in the last 8 months or so, you've been an advisor over at Bookend .ai. Yeah.
Yep.
So I want to ask you to introduce yourself, but I'd love to hear a little bit more about that. And maybe the audience wants to hear a little bit about how that might be relevant to some of your opinions today, because we're going to talk a little bit about that impact of AI. So you want to kind of give a pitch? Who's Charles?
Yeah. So got a doctorate in industrial organizational psychologist, and I've been an assessment specialist my whole career, working with enterprise companies to help them put, legally compliant, candidate-friendly, accurate assessment programs in place. I can also build them. One of my biggest differentiators is I study the market for assessment tools for the last 20 some years. So I have a database of some 400 companies. I call it predictive hiring now because we're really looking at signal to predict success. Assessments do that in a very specific way that is the right way, in my opinion. There's other tools now that are beginning to function the same way, and there's lots to talk about with those as well. But the paradigm is alive and well, and in fact a little bit old-fashioned when it comes to traditional assessment. So I've been sitting around innovation as well in the space, working for a lot of startups, and of course now in the age of AI and generative AI, I'm studying how are people who do what I do using these tools, how are talent acquisition functions using these tools, and where do the twain meet,
Yeah. So, well, tell me a little bit about this, appropriately named, this bookend.ai, where you're
at.
Does that dovetail nicely into the work?
It is somewhat and then not. So it's a good friend of mine's company, and he and a bunch of really smart ex-Google folks created a platform that allows you to basically put an open source LLM on there and have all the LLM ops to keep it in behaving properly and do your retrieval augmented generation, your fine tuning. So it has that capacity. It's been a very interesting road with that though, because and when they first started, I was saying, hey, there's potentially a lot of existential threats here because all the big platforms are offering security and ease of spin up. That's kind of a very intuitive. So they've pivoted more to the medical space. I signed on to help with HR related stuff, and I still do. I have a client on there doing some really cool stuff for that client. Essentially, what they've done, and they're kind of a productivity people management platform for SMB, large business, and they have customers who've got 10 years of data on there. So what Bookend did was create a chatbot type of thing that would sit on top of all that data, and not even a chatbot, but an assistant, and pop up and say, hey, did you know this trend was going on in your data? So maybe that's something you want to look at. So you're extracting more knowledge and value out of a corpus of data that you already have. And that's helping you optimize and refine whatever you're doing. So I think that's a really cool application. I am working on building some role play based LLM assessments slowly, have some good concepts there. And I'll be putting it on that platform so that, you can't build an application for production off of Chat GTP's consumer thing. There's too much risk there. So the open source models, and there's lots of them now, are where you want to go. And I think that's an important thing. I gave a workshop at a conference recently about generative AI in our space. And I think a lot of people have the perception still that you're just going to use ChatGTP or you're going to use, Claude or something just straight off the internet,
Right.
or off your browser or whatever, or native on your computer. But I don't think people are really building applications with those things. You can't really do that. What you can do is what we all do probably is say, hey, I need this writing to be a little tighter, or hey, I got a blank sheet of paper here,
Sure.
and help me get to somewhere with some organized ideas so I can take it from there. Thank you. That's a completely different use case, right?
Yeah, I think it's funny because we've seen the pivot. Is it Grammarly? I think it's
Yeah.
Grammarly. It just did the pivot where it's no longer just about grammar. Now it's about making recommendations.
Yeah.
Right. So it's about spotting areas that a prof might find a challenge with in a paper, or where a student, right, might be rambling, or so a publisher might be rambling a little bit in their content. So it is taking on more of that assistive role than just a producer correct standpoint, which I love.
Yeah. And in our industry, just like a lot of them, there's a lot of grunt work. We do a lot of study of jobs, and then we write competency descriptions and things like that. I just am finishing doing one. It's the first time I used Firefly's AI note taker for all my interviews, and my team did too, and all our focus groups. And I fed those, we anonymized them, we fed them into ChatGTP and started asking them, what are the main competencies? How do we personally? And it did an amazing job. I mean, and I used to spend hours doing that.
Yeah.
And it got us to a really good state where I just needed to smooth some things over in 2 hours. He just gave me back 20 hours of my life,
Yeah. Andrew Flowers over at Recruitonomics did a really great, everybody was talking about robots and taking over, and he made a great statement, I guess about a half a year ago or so. Just said, it's an augmentation. It's a blend. It's an assistant. And I think it was it Bill Gates? I forget, one of the big dogs, who had said, first organization that nails assistant, a true delivery of a full assistant, is going to win the war for AI across the board. You think that's true?
He was planning his own so that he could prop up his own stock there or whatever. But I mean, I think we already have seen pretty good ones. I know a lot of folks that do what I do. And again, I did a little interview project where I interviewed about 20 IO psychologists at big enterprise companies about how they're using AI. And almost every one of them said that they were using, it as an assistant to help them write. But a lot of those big companies have created their own internal, corporate version of ChatGTP to act as an assistant. So I feel like that's already happening. I guess it's, how do you define assistant? You know, is the assistant, at what level of stuff is that assistant doing for you?
Yeah,
You know,
what's the
and
deep dive on that? I think you're right though. A lot
yeah,
of organizations have brought these in house. They've sort of fenced in their own versions of these, and they're really starting to play with them. I think it's great. So
yeah,
Charles, well, let me ask you then, because you're out there, you're kind of building your own, you're playing in the space. Can you share maybe some of the more significant, I guess, advancements from your point that AI is having impacting, and let's stick to just the hiring process, just in recent years, like
yeah.
where would be the most significant advancement, or do you think we've got a big one coming that nobody's paying enough attention to yet?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think about it, talk about it a lot. And I would say this, you have kind of two things going on. You've got a lot of the intelligence AI tools that are going out there and sourcing candidates, scraping information, coming back and feeding candidates or screening resumes. And we've been doing resume matching for various ways for a long time, because the
Yeah,
friction, as we all know, the friction at the top of the funnel is massive. Getting your voice through as a candidate and as an employer, finding the signal that is really going to predict who's going to be successful is extremely difficult. And so everybody's trying to solve for that. And they have been for a long time. So you've got those kind of tools that are typically not psychometric, typically built on some unexplainable models that aren't very transparent. And I don't think, just look, I think it's great that we're trying these things. I don't think those things are able to do what they're kind of supposed to do at this point. And then you've got your traditional assessment tools, which still look very, very similar. Somewhere in the middle, you
yeah,
have AI interviews that take the transcript and infer personality attributes and things like that. Uh, I feel like simulations are the future. So the two things I talk about as being the future, and I don't think we're we have the technology now evolving, but we're not there yet. And that would be verification. So for skills based hiring,
yeah,
verification of skills at scale, right? You've got all these apps, like I was just talking about, that will say, here's a person's skill profile, but they're not verified. It's just information you've pulled off of, the ether somewhere.
yeah,
We don't have any input that says this person really knows this and at what level. So as we look to verify and credentialize skills in an automated way, that'll be great, because then we can parse a candidate out into a set of believable skills, and we can look for that signal and know that's a quality signal with our receptor that's tuned to those skills. And then the second one is simulations. I feel like, look, from a pure your candidate experience guy, this is a show about candidate experience. From a pure candidate experience standpoint, I always have this mantra: never leave a candidate asking, why is this company asking me this? What does this have to do with my job? Right? Simulations are a real good way to say, this is what the job's all about, right? And we've done those in some regard, but truly personalizing those, truly making them contextually relevant to an organization, mapped onto their values very precisely, is very costly. It takes a lot of time and it's costly. And so those are barriers. I believe with generative AI and text to video, we'll be able to create very hyper realistic scenarios, where we have, this could be a scenario where you're testing my public speaking or my engagement, or yours as a host, whatever. The scenarios, the backgrounds, etc., are going to come to life a lot more. Candidates are going to really enjoy that. And there may be a day when, again, this is how I think. You might have your phone and you might have some app and you're going to travel around and do what you do. And maybe you get some mock phone calls that you have to answer. Maybe you've got some emails you've got to answer. And that's really a simulation and assessment. And that data kind of accrues over a little bit of time. I think we'll have that. And both of the things I just talked about will contribute to personal portable data wallets that begin as part of your education process, right?
okay.
So I'm
Well,
high in the sky. I'm up there. But this is how I see it in the future.
okay. So let's call it a little bit of a difference for folks who may not be aware, right? So I have a friend who is going through a job hunt right now, right? As many
Mm-hmm.
of us do. And what she is saying is she's getting a lot of robocalls back to do the pre-screening. Like she's had at least 3 in the
Yeah.
last week or so
Mm-hmm.
where it calls back and it's it's just it's not a real person on
Yep.
the other end of the line. You're asking a question, waiting for the response, like any other robocall. When you say, however, Charles, when you say something about these assessments or these things that are wildly interactive, is
Mm-hmm.
like we're already at a stage where we're getting these robocalls. Are you seeing that these are what next level robocalls, or are you envisioning it's something like off the charts? Like right now, you'd be interacting, you wouldn't even know it's a bot. Like where is that in your head, Charles?
Right, right. Yeah, great question. Wow. So I think a robocall is a little different in you're supposed to be engaging with a recruiter. In this scenario, a recruiter would say, or you'd click on a job ad wherever in the hiring workflow the assessment comes. Um, in the here, the nearest condition, staying focused on what's reality over the next couple of years or whatever, um, is going to be, hey, here's an assessment you need to take. You're going to role play, or this is going to be a typical work scenario, and you're going to be talking to the Chris bot, and he's going to be asking you questions, and just act naturally and do what you might be doing on the job. So there should be a host or a facilitator that tees up, why are you doing this, what's it going to be all about. That could be a bot, I guess, but you're not in a one or two way, excuse me, dialogue with a bot that's supposed to be filling the function of a screening, if that makes sense. I think it's
Yeah.
more like the traditional assessment.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I do think there's a next level piece there, but I also think there's a big watch out of, the difference there we're implying is that there is something being inferred by the technology based on the responses or my facial expressions or my body language or something like that. And
Right, right.
you get into some dicey territory there as an employer.
Absolutely. Well, the way I see these things and the way I'm working on, the one that I'm working on is we still study the job and we still go through the process of finding scenarios, etc. It's just a simple chatbot at this point that's role playing with you. So you're responding, and we have in concept, we haven't executed it yet, but it's trained to try and elicit things from you too. So like if you want to test somebody's flexibility, then you're gonna in the scenario, you're gonna do things that require them to respond with some amount of flexibility. And we'll build a machine learning model using data that is gonna be kind of standard to how we would have done things already. So I feel like there's massive potential for it to be horrible. But if you have folks like myself and other technologists, and you kind of have some guardrails, I think you can just bring a more traditional paradigm to life a little bit more. Eventually, I think these sims will get more and more complex, but uh, I don't I don't see it necessarily immediately how we're talking about it. I have an interesting
Yeah,
question for you, Chris, if that's all right. So you talk about robo chatbots, et cetera, right? So it's hiring and sending your application in is a black box, right? A lot of people don't ever hear back at all. And
sure.
so part of the chatbot thing has been, well, we want to engage people. We don't have enough human recruiters to do this. So we'll engage people with the chatbot. We'll screen them with the chatbot. To me, that still feels kind of impersonal. When you talked about robo screening calls,
Yep.
you didn't say that with a positive light in your voice. It was kind of more like, what the hell? So in your study of candidate experience, et cetera, is it better? I mean, I guess it's better to have something than nothing, but how are chatbots like that really perceived by applicants? Do they warm up to those things or what?
So from what I've heard so far, a lot depends on. I mean, there's a lot of factors, right? A lot will depend on the execution of that, how it's rolled
Hmm.
out, and I also think
Sure.
a lot depends on the candidate and potentially maybe even the
Right.
type of job.
Yeah.
Uh, I
True.
have not spoken to any job seekers who have been excited to get a robocall,
Yeah.
but I also haven't spoken to any that have hung up.
Yeah.
So I think you've got a little bit of a double-edged sword in that, hey, at least I'm getting something, right? In a place where
Yeah.
before I got nothing. And it's
Exactly.
getting better slowly. And if you're in the space, because most of the 99% of the people I talk to that are looking for work are recruiters, right? And
Yeah.
recruiting leaders. So they get the space, and I think they just kind of grin and kind of push through it because they know that's just the future of the process.
Yeah. It's survival. I just need to get to the
Mhm.
next stage. Maybe I'll get to talk to a human, right?
Just
And
give me the job.
yeah, chatbots are a lot better now. I remember 2020, 2019, we were talking about them a lot, but they're pretty dumb. I mean, if they didn't have a very specific thing, I would interact with them and it would ask me, do you have X years of experience doing this? And I would say, well, not quite, but I have this and it's similar. They didn't know what to do. I think now with generative AI, one in a million times they're going to tell you you can get a car for $1 or something like that, right? But if you remember that craziness, or change
Yeah.
the policy of the company. But for the most part, they're at least more conversant and have a little bit more uh, of a personality. And I study the assessment market. I'm going through. I have about 400 vendors in my database, and I get new ones all the time, and there are more avatar based interviews, more avatar
Yeah.
based things now, that the avatars aren't creepy. They're pretty realistic looking.
Yeah. Yeah. I have to say, Charles, so when I was a young recruiter and I was recruiting for call centers,
Yeah.
I remember we had a vendor, and it escapes me the name of the vendor, and I know there are hundreds more of them, but we
Yeah.
had a vendor that the candidate would go sit in a booth and would call this number,
Yeah.
or the candidate would sit in the booth and wait for the phone to ring, and they had a series of scripts. They got 5 minutes to look it over, and it
Yep.
was somebody role playing as the customer. You had a customer, when I did the demo, a customer with a broken arm who couldn't get in to pay their bill, and I had
Yeah.
to get them to pay their bill. It was a revenue collections role or
Yeah.
something like
Yeah.
that.
Sure.
You had one that was belligerent. You had like
Hmm.
a little old lady who just needed help making her payment. Like all those things. There's a whole industry of people sitting in call centers, that are sort of driving that. And what you're saying is that's done. They're right.
Yeah. So the assessment I've been talking about is for call centers. I've done a lot of call center work, right? So we don't have to have a human calling that and doing the scoring, and then maybe detecting an accent or something and having some bias there. You can take the scenarios. You can make the bot elicit an outcome, and I think that's a pretty powerful thing. And it's easy because there's no visuals. But
Yeah.
call centers are one of the most amenable jobs for simulations. There's a lot of assessments for the last 20 years, even, where you've got a screen, you've got a bunch of information, the call will come over the computer. Part of it is just, can you transcribe numbers accurately while you're listening and looking at the screen?
Well,
Part
the
of it might,
role is brutal. Like the
yeah.
role, like the volume that it just goes through. So I mean, to be able to
Oh my
pivot in that
gosh.
space quickly is perfect.
Yeah, and there's a lot of AI for call centers, but not as much on the hiring side yet. I was talking to somebody the other day we were talking about it, call center AI, and she worked at a call center. She said, "Yeah, what we have now, we have AI doing a lot of the easy stuff, so all the agents get is pissed off customers with hard problems. So their jobs just got a lot harder because now all the easy stuff's been handled by bots." And I don't think that and every time I do a call center interaction, I think to myself, could this be automated? And I did one with my burglar alarm company the other day. I see what's automated. I see ChatGPT. I don't think that a, a bot could have
Yeah.
successfully handled that interaction. It just took too much connecting the dots.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, here's that. So we do have Adams on. I'm going to throw this up on the screen. Adam says he had an awesome experience with a chat bot recently that literally took his entire application while just checking out a job posting versus
Uh-huh.
him having to log in and do all of that manual. So there is an upside for some of the folks. Thanks, Adam. There is an upside here for some of the folks who are going through it.
Absolutely. Look, the hiring process is brutal for applicants, and that's why a lot more of them are turning to AI tools and mass
Yeah.
apply tools and interview co-pilots. It's a new age there. And talk about candidate experience. This is where I'm really excited to think and talk about the candidate cheating and faking thing. And I have my own very strong opinions about that.
Well, so
If you
we don't
want
have to
to
go
hear 'em.
deep on that, but I do think it's a really good call, Charles. So I guess, so that dovetails into another question of, like, from the employer's perspective, what would you say would be a key element or key strategy to maybe integrate AI into that process effectively? And I'm
Hmm.
gonna, as a hanger on, I'm gonna put ethically in there as well, right? Because it's a touchy
Right.
topic here when we're talking about assessments, but to put that in
Yeah.
efficiently, smoothly, and so to deliver that ideal candidate experience versus clunky and car for $1 and that sort of thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's an interesting one, and I don't, we haven't really seen. I guess the easiest answer would be an avatar-based kind of interviewer, role player type thing. There hasn't been a lot of major innovations on the candidate-facing side when it comes to AI and assessments from my field. Um, I think we're still delivering pretty much the same stuff, albeit shorter and sometimes gamified. Where the AI is being used is on the back end to help create the scoring and to help build scenarios and do all of this kind of the grunt work almost. Um,
Yeah,
I believe that I believe that it still always goes back to some core fundamental things that to me are just the golden rule, right? You want to treat a candidate like they would want to be treated. You want to communicate to them, where am I in the process? Why am I taking this assessment? One of the things that you don't get a lot, that I understand why. And I was working for a UK based assessment provider for a while. And over there, you do get a lot of this, which is feedback. I'm going to take your
mhm,
assessment and I'm going to get a one-page feedback thing that just tells me some general stuff about me and my employability, or my strengths. Of course, um, you worry from a liability standpoint. Oh, you didn't get the job because you're just not a team player, dude. Like you can't be doing that kind of feedback, right? But you can certainly give people positive information that they may not have known about themselves from taking the assessment. Here's something for you. You've given us your time. Here's something for you. You don't see that in the US very much. I wish we could see it more. I think any kind of gamified branded thing is always a lot of fun and enjoyable, but expensive, still very
yeah,
expensive. I've seen some
yeah,
cool ones. Marriott had one a long time ago called you were in the back of house in a catering in the restaurant kitchen, and you had to move around and do things. And it was more what we call a recruitment game. It wasn't necessarily scored, uh, but it was to engage applicants and to get them understanding what the job was about. So there's any form of interactivity to me is better than sitting there clicking 50 radio buttons on a screen.
yeah, for sure. I think that's well, and I think that's you kind of get into that area of talking about VR and
Yeah.
AR components to that experience. So not just the branding side of it, but some
Hmm.
engagement piece. Where I think Carrie Newen had mentioned this over to EY. She'd mentioned she's one of the panelists on the research study we're doing now. Had mentioned I think a throwback all the way to Second Life. And if you
Yeah.
remember,
Oh boy, remember that?
yeah, there was a
It,
telecom company that you got on the
hmm.
was it FiOS? You got on the FiOS roller coaster for their internet speed,
Uh-huh.
but then you could go in and do these virtual job fairs and you could learn more about the work. And it was all a cartoon and it was just, 1.0 graphics. But I think it was
Yeah.
kind of interesting to hear a callback. Here we are in 2024. That's got to be 20
Yeah.
something years ago when that came out.
Yeah.
And they were just playing with it. We still
Hmm.
haven't nailed it.
Well, the user experience for Second Life was really difficult. I tried it a couple times. It was hard to move around, and people I didn't know were making fun of me for my outfit stuff. I'm like, yeah, this isn't what I want. But I think VR and AR is really interesting because it has a lot of promise. But there's one thing about that. There's a couple, and I think from an exclusion or kind of fairness standpoint, first of all, VR
Yeah.
headsets are expensive. They do have like a Google one that you can make out of cardboard, but for general, that's equipment. And so job
Yeah.
seekers, you can't assume they have that equipment. And then for me, I get motion sick really easily. So, where's my accommodation? I'm not going to be able to perform on this VR thing. If I'm dizzy, how can I give my best performance? So
Yeah.
there's things like that I think that are limiting with those things. But I do think wearables. I like the glasses. I have a set of the Meta AI glasses. They're not AR, but
Yeah.
they're amazing, man. You walk around and you can say, "Hey Meta, what kind of dog is that?" And it'll tell you. You can listen to your podcast. You can take pictures of stuff and identify them. Eventually, you'll be able to have. I can live stream from them.
Yeah.
Eventually, you'll have some AR on those things. And that might begin to change things where it's cheap enough that you could send somebody instead of those. Remember, early on, I think it was my friend Theo, green job interviews, they were sending candidates webcams.
Oh
Hey, you're going to
yeah.
participate in this
Yeah.
interview. Here's a webcam, so we know you have one. We might get some tech that can do that someday.
Who was I think it was TMP. I think TMP did a video when Google Glass first came out. And it was a candidate experience video. And I remember you were getting prompts and whatnot only you could see, but then the interviewer also had one and someone was in their ear telling them to ask a question. And it was a whole little like intriguing, but a little concerning also.
Yeah. What do you call a person who is wearing Google glasses in public?
A glass hole.
There you go. That was kind of a dad joke, a little inappropriate. It was a tech dad joke, and people did. That was a real thing, right? You call people glass holes.
It was a real thing. I remember that.
They're just wayfarers. You can't tell them a glass hole.
Yeah. Well, okay. So in the note of future, Charles. So I know it took us way back to bring us all the way forward.
Yeah, sure.
Talking about the future in your space, this sweet spot that you've sort of carved out for yourself, Charles. What do you see coming up in the next? I'll say 3 to 5 years that employers, specifically TA leaders, should be paying attention to today, like keeping their eye on.
Yeah, that's such a great question, and it's so hard to answer. I feel like if you think about kind of diffusion of adoption curve, that we're still in the early adopter, kind of that, I can't remember what the next phase is as you're going up that curve, but I think vendors are always going to be a little further up the curve. They're always going to be producing more technologically advanced stuff than companies might be ready for a while. But I talk about safe innovation. I don't think there's any problem with experimenting with these tools, but if it's a vendor selling you a predictive hiring tool, they should still be able to have a tech report. Their stuff should still be, transparent, explainable, following, whatever guidelines there are. I think the biggest thing I see is we're still waiting for legislation to keep piling up, right? The EUAI Act is, I think, going to be very powerful in terms of what it asks of vendors. Unlike the New York law, which is kind of a joke, really, we're going to see more powerful stuff happen where there's going to be more accountability. And I think a lot of people are waiting until they see what the guidelines truly are and how people can conform to it till they dive in. Again, in my project interview. Go ahead.
No, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I was just going to say, I think you nailed it. The second piece is the accountability with regards to, I think people like pay transparency. We've got laws stating that these need to be listed in job listings in all these locations, yet we're nowhere near compliance on that. SEC filings with disclosures, nowhere near everybody doing it. And I think you nailed it, Charles. Like, I don't think people are waiting to see sort of how this evolves. I think they're waiting to see who gets punished and how much is the punishment.
That's definitely part of it. I can tell you this too, with conviction. The rules for how to use an AI-based hiring tool are exactly the same as the uniform guidelines, which is the EEOC's kind of canon about what's kosher and not. It's the same thing. Study the job, understand what the job is, only ask job-related questions, and track the results of those questions versus job performance, and just maintain this thing. The AI is producing an output that's a signal someone's using to make a decision, or it's doing that on its own, which is harder. But ultimately, you can still validate it. You can still see if it has bias towards the people who are taking it. Finding the training data and is that biased or not, that's very difficult. But it's the output. A lot of times, I think how the sausage is made is not what the government's concerned with. They're concerned with, does the sausage taste good to everybody equally or something?
Does anybody die when they eat it? That's all they
Yeah, I know, something like that, right? So the rules really are the same, and if you default to those rules, you're in good shape. And those rules are stewardship of this stuff. The number one piece of advice I would give to somebody who is really wanting to do assessment right is study the job first and make sure that you know what that job is and isn't, and then only align things that it is with it. And that takes extra effort. So that's where you
Yeah.
find automating. We're just going to scrape a job description. That's going to tell us all the personality traits we need for a job. Job descriptions are famously horrible, as are resumes, yet those are the main inputs and outputs to job matching with AI. So you build a house on garbage, you're going to have a smelly house, you know?
I like the twist. So look, Charles, we ask everybody this question before we let them off the podcast. So if you were going to write a book today about this topic, what would the title of that book be?
That's a great question. I have a book that I'm trying to think of what, and I might have a title for it somewhere, but the ethos of it is, when the stakes are high, people take the time to assess and evaluate people properly. Astronauts, pro football players, let's see who else. CEOs, right? You're going to really spend time evaluating those people in a systematic way because the stakes are really high. So I don't know, high stakes hiring. Explain. That's probably not good. If I could multitask better, I could go into my thing because I put that aside for a minute. But and so just like I can't remember a dad joke or make one up spontaneously, I don't have my title. I guess my title would be "Pay Attention to What the Job's All About." That's a shitty title, crappy title.
I don't think that's bad. I think as long as your subtitle is strong, I think you're okay. Like build a house on garbage, your house is going to stink. I think that's the best subtitle.
That would be catchy. I think people would, I think people might look at that. It's okay to be punchy. I could ask ChatGPT to help me, and it could probably come up with some stuff.
In a heartbeat. Yeah, in a heartbeat. All right. Well, look, Charles, I do have one last dad joke for you.
Mm-hmm. Good.
Why did the LLM go on a diet? You're not ready.
It wanted to be a supermodel.
No, it had too many bites.
But LLMs are models, and supermodels are typically, prototypically, if not, if that's correct or not, very slender. And so it went on a diet because it wanted to be a supermodel.
Is supermodel a term for Ella? Is a hypermodel supermodel? No,
I don't think so. No,
that's worth a shot.
But it's implied.
Really not my area of expertise.
It's implied. No, I mean, I'm not building these things, but certainly the bites one is more concrete for sure.
Well, it's BYT.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. I know. So I'll tell you a very quick, funny thing. So do you remember when the early days of corporate email or even email, you would get people emailing silly jokes, right? And it would just be like, or there was the urinal test where it would just be these dots and it would say, which urinal would you choose? Those cease to exist now. I don't know if they replaced by memes, but I was going to write a book back then called Giggle Bites. And it was just going to be a curation of all those stupid email jokes you got, just like a joke book for the bathroom or something. And I thought,
I think that might do quite well. Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe I should revisit that.
I wonder if those were those the original memes? Maybe they were.
I mean, kind of, because we didn't have visuals, but those just stopped. I don't know. Maybe everybody got too busy. I don't know, but I'm going to ask ChatGPT why those stopped.
Probably Reddit. Reddit was born, and that's when that
exactly.
Stopped,
Social interaction, like you said. Now you can take a picture of a donkey and turn somebody into a donkey. Whatever you would do. All right, Adam, you would buy a copy of that. I think that's something I could write pretty quickly if there's an archives. I know there's a thing called the Internet Archives, which is a cool project. And they have every internet page indexed. But these weren't internet things. These were individual jokes people would tell. And I bet it was chock full of dad jokes. Absolutely.
I'm sure that it was. And if you forwarded the email, Bill Gates was going to send you $100, and it was that whole era of emails that were going on.
And the Nigerian prince.
Yes, 100%. Charles, I'm going to ask you this question. Last question. You've written your book. You've come up with a pithy name. Who gets the first signed copy of your book?
Gotcha. Well, I've now pivoted my book to Giggle Bites, by the way, because I did have a clever name for a book. But so in that one, but no, really my hiring book, Who Gets It? I don't know. I think I would maybe I'd send it to like Josh Burson or something. Maybe he would want to read about it, and he gets a lot of audience. I would send it actually to you, Jerry, and Josh Burson. How about that?
Well, it's very generous of you, Charles. I know you're a super busy man. Much gratitude. So grateful for you showing up today, giving us what's top of mind for you. Appreciate you chiming in and weighing in with us.
Oh man, thanks so much for asking me. I've been a big fan of you guys for a very, very long time. It's all about the candidate, people. It is all about the candidate. You got to use the golden rule and think about what's going on in their head when you're perpetrating your hiring process on them. It makes a difference.
Yeah, 100%. And for those who were listening on the treadmill versus watching, you want to connect with Charles. He's on LinkedIn. It's Dr. Charles Handler, all one word. Dr. Charles Handler is his user ID on there, but you can find him pretty easy. And if you're looking for him and you can't find him, just ping one of us. We'll make sure to give you that introduction. And with that, Charles, that's it. We're out of here.
Yeah. Thanks, Chris. I appreciate it so much.
All right, bud. We'll see you. Thank you, everybody.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks for listening to the CXR channel. Please subscribe to CXR on your favorite podcast resource and leave us a review while you're at it. Learn more about CXR at our website, cxr.works, facebook.com and twitter.com/careercrossroads, and on Instagram @careerxroads. We'll catch you next time.